Here with a new episode of Soloing Secrets, and this is Terry Kath, and I've had some requests to feature more from this legendary late great musician. I did put together a Chordplay episode surrounding Chicago, a few years ago, but this time we're going to do a deep dive into his soloing style. And definitely, Terry's a legendary guitarist. His career started around 1963, and he joined a band called the Mystics, and then that band broke up, but it included two future, bandmates of the band Chicago. So the Mystics broke up, another band broke up, and they kind of merged with that broken band. And then there were a few other kind of mix-ups and change-ups, and the next thing you knew, the band Chicago was formed. Very influential, very important. And Terry was definitely a founding member, vocalist, guitarist, and he really did kind of present this really soulful, energetic sound in Chicago's music. A legend. So originally Chicago was known as Chicago Transit Authority, and the literal Chicago Transit Authority kind of, had a problem with their name, so they just shortened it to Chicago. But when they were CTA, there were a lot of musicians and artists that took notice of this big rock band with the horn section, and that includes Jimi Hendrix. Jimi Hendrix was a notable fan, loved the band Chicago, loved the horns and that soulful sound, and he absolutely loved Terry Kath's guitar playing. Here's a couple quotes from Jimi Hendrix himself. So much like we've done in other episodes in the Soloing Secrets series, when you're scoping out a certain player or band, it's always a good idea to check out their influences, which reveal certain things that pop up in their music. And with Terry, there's a healthy dose of blues rock, and jazz musicians. He definitely loved Clapton and Michael Bloomfield and Hendrix, but then he also had a lot of jazz influences, Dick Dale and the Ventures, and some surf guitar influences. But here's Terry Kath's elusive musical influences. Now, as far as Terry's actual soloing secrets, the things he typically would do when he'd grab a guitar and play a lick or a fill or a solo, and there's a lot. Modified blues phrasing, various pentatonic scales, various scales and modes, single string scales, jazz influences, he did a lot of chromatic stuff, using effects like phaser and wah and fuzzy, guitar tones. But here's some of Terry Kath's soloing secrets, and keep in mind this is just a partial list, but this is some of the stuff he's definitely well known for. So the music featured in this episode actually came from two classic Chicago albums, and during Terry's lifetime, he basically appears on 9 Chicago studio albums, 3 live albums, and 2 compilations, and there are some more recent compilations that include Terry's music that I didn't count. I mainly was counting like the old stuff from when he was alive. I think one of those compilations were from the 90s. But anyway, yesterday I caught an NPR segment, and they were talking about the National Recording Registry. And Chicago's first album, Chicago Transit Authority is going to be included. Miles Davis Bitches Brew, Steve Miller Fly Like an Eagle, there's a Tracy Chapman album or whatever. But I thought that was really cool because I caught that while I was putting this together. And I was like, hey, I'm getting ready to feature that album. But CTA is getting ready to be included in the National Recording Registry. I thought that was so cool. And here's the image with the 2 albums I pulled music from in this episode. Technically Terry's first and last albums with the band. So here we go. Alright, with the opening jam, that was me playing around with the song South California Purples from the CTA album, and I did include that in the Chicago Chordplay lesson that I made. I think that was last year. And we just looked at the riff in that lesson, and now we're going to take a look at some of Terry's licks that appear in that song. And the riff, which I have broken down before, but the riff's in A, and we're doing... starts at somewhere around 307, 308, something like that. And you hear Terry, bridge pickup, tone control is rolled off. This is like an old Roy Buchanan trick. And he's bending this D to E up a whole step, and when he bends it, he also opens up that tone control, going from 0 to 10, like this. Now, of course, keep in mind, Terry has a humbucker in his neck position, so it's really, lively when he did it, in the recording. It's not really the same, with my little single coil here. But after he does that, then he starts grabbing that bend and starts bending and releasing. Like that, and then you hear this really aggressive bend and release to that C to that A right there. When you get to that A note, then you start picking it aggressively. Something like that. And right there, that's cool. After you pick that A note, then you're coming down like an implied, A minor 7 arpeggio right there. And you basically hear him slide off that A note, and then you hear him slide in and out of that E up there. Like that. So he's doing this. And then you distinctly hear. So right there, kind of a typical blues bend. And grab that G note, bend it to A. And then you're going to hop up and grab this A note and bend that up to C, like a step and a half. And then you release that bend. And then you hear Terry do this like chromatic pull-off. Right there, that E flat to D. And then you want to grab that A and bend it to C again. And right there I kind of added that G to E and then bend and release on that A to C. And then Terry didn't do this in the solo, but I added it because we're going to talk about this later, in this lesson. But those single string kind of legato, flutters. However I ended it, but right there, Terry did a lot of that kind of stuff. You can hear that in 25 or 6 to 4 and tons of Chicago songs. But those fast, hammer on pull off kind of flutters. Usually taking place on a single string. So that's just kind of a condensed, brief look at some of the stuff that Terry did in that song. But South California Purples has that slow, lazy groove, and it's kind of rocking out. And Terry just jams it the entire song. Next up's another section from Terry's solo in the song South California Purples. I think this takes place around 3:34, and it's something like this. Something like that. And somewhere around 3:34 you're going to hear this. Right? Starting on that A note. And grab that D, bend it to E twice. And then after that, you got this interesting kind of jazzy. You're doing that little kind of a finger twister there. And when you get back there, then you're gonna grab that D, and then you just start milking that whole step bend, D to E, and he's like bending and releasing. But that's a really interesting song, and Terry's very expressive in his soloing and phrases. Really cool stuff, and kind of jazzy too. Next up are some licks from the song Poem 58. This is also from the CTA album, and this takes place around 104, and you'll hear Terry doing. Something like that. One more time. Something like that. So once again, he's doing these kind of bluesy bends. Like that. So it's really interesting to hear that D to E bent, grab that A, that G, and then your shift sliding into that A note. That's kind of a stock blues lick, but that's Terry's version of it right there. And then, like that, kind of a hammer-on pull-off, and you're shifting back into like the A minor pentatonic box. Like that. Then you're going to do it again. But right there, the second time, it's a little different. Like the way he's kind of setting up, ending on that A note. Kind of an interesting lick, and that's a cool song too from Chicago. Here's another lick from Poem 58. This takes place around 119, and there's this like aggressive picking going on like this. One more time. So once again, A minor pentatonic, and we're weaving from one position to another. So start on that A note, and you're going to end on that D up there on the G string. When you get to that D note, that's where he starts picking. So it's not quite tremolo picking, he's just aggressively, repeatedly picking that note and also bending it up and down. And you're going to do it again. Something like that. So Terry would do that, like aggressively pick something, also bending kind of, the note and stuff like that. Very expressive, and it grabs your attention. Like, what's going on right? What's going on right there when you hear all the repetitive notes and those picked notes over and over like that? Next up, this rapid, like legato phrasing from the song Liberation. This takes place around 2:14 in the song, and it's in B flat minor, like B flat minor 7. And somewhere around 2:14, you're going to hear Terry play this run. It's just really cool. One more time. So this is really cool, played over B flat minor 7. And you distinctly hear this fast legato, like hammer-ons on the way up. And he's cruising up, that G, A flat, B flat, C to D flat, and end on that D flat. And then do it again, and you're going to ascend and end on E flat. Just avoid that D flat and go straight from C to E flat like this. And then do it again. And then kind of a smear bend and end on that B flat. Like that. And of course it's really fast too, and like the band's hitting and accenting, those hits. Here's another lick from the song Liberation from CTA, and this is something that Terry did a lot, not just in the song Liberation. He did this in other songs too. And this kind of blurry legato shift sliding between, two pentatonic positions. So just a reminder, Liberation's in B flat minor 7, right? And you can hear Terry doing this like throughout that song. One more time. So it's real fast and slippery. So slowly, like that. And it's all about where it falls, because it falls right on the downbeat. Right? So it's kind of an interesting, blurry, legato, slip and slide lick. And of course, he's playing it like hyperactive and fast. Here's yet another lick from Liberation, and this is this funky, honky-tonk, kind of bluesy bending, like this. One more time. Reminds me of like Joe Walsh or something. It's just really obnoxious. And once again, we're in B flat, right? B flat minor 7. And you hear him grabbing this A flat, and he's doing this bend and release, and he's picking through the releases. Like Like that. So think, you know, B flat minor 7, or B flat minor pentatonic rather. And he's grabbing that A flat and he's just kind of milking the bend back and forth. And then you want to do it again. And then you do all that again. And the last time just end on that B flat. So like I said, it's this kind of strange, obnoxious bending, but I liked it. It kind of reminds me of Joe Walsh and some other players. Okay, up next we're going to take a look at some of Terry's single string flutters. You know, those hammer-on pull-off moments when he would shift around on a single string. And you can find this in lots of his solos, 25 or 6/4 for sure. And we were just looking at licks from the song Liberation, right? And that was in B flat minor 7. So let's just stay in that key. And what I'm going to do is show you how to play B Dorian on the B string. So think B Dorian. But we're going to do it like this. One more time. And in a single position, we're basically doing... But we're not doing it like that. We're doing it on the B string, right? So right there, we're basically ending an octave lower than where we started. Like that, right? And it's just the process of getting from here to there. And we're just doing this kind of quick hammer on pull off and then a little shift, right? Like that. One more time, slow. And keep in mind, that's B flat Dorian. Played entirely on the B string. And of course, Terry would just fly through it. And that's a really interesting way of getting, you know, from one position to another, and you're creating this little cascading, kind of descending moment. You could also flip that and you could ascend and climb up if you wanted to go, you know, higher. But there's kind of Terry's, you know, descending flutter move. Last but not least is the opening Terry solo from the song Takin It On Uptown from Chicago 9, which is on the wall right there. I've always loved that album cover because it's a map of Chicago, and I'm from Chicago. So I just happen to have both the Chicago albums I'm featuring this lesson. Takin It On Uptown's that. Like that. And you hear Terry do like this. Something like that. One more time. You know, or something like that. So that kind of lazy, and this is in A or A7. Start with that bend on that G note to A with vibrato. Coming down, you know, A minor pentatonic. Like that. So after that first bend, come down, you're going to do a bend and release on that D note. Go back to that C and then catch G right there twice and then end on A. Like that. Then you've got this, you know, D to E, C to A. And then you're going to slide into this E note and catch that A note on the B. And then, so you're catching that G note there, grab this D, you're going to gradually bend that like a quarter step, half step, whole step, like that. Like that. And then you got this. And at the end, it's all crammed in there. Something like that. Something like that. Really interesting phrasing there. It's kind of lazy, like blues rock, but Terry was such a badass guitarist, and I love that song too. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Soloing Secrets with this look at the late, great Terry Kath. Definitely a legendary guitarist, very respected. I'm a huge fan for sure. And another one of those musicians that died tragically. And you can't help but wonder, like, what would he have done if he wouldn't have died tragically and would have continued, living and making music? Obviously, he was very prolific. And I don't know if he would have continued with Chicago all this time. He might have broken off and started his own band or like a solo project or something. I don't know. Because he was definitely a rocker. And as soon as he was gone, that's when, in my opinion, that's when Chicago lost all that energy and fire and they just kind of turned more poppy and polished. But I like those early years, 70s Chicago. It's all sweaty and dirty and funky and horny with all the horns and stuff. And it's like, yeah, and Terry is singing and jamming and just a badass, really. When you go back and listen to it, it's like, man, he was way ahead of his time, way ahead of the curve. Lots of guitarists borrowed his ideas, his licks, his feedback, and all this stuff that he was really great at. And just an essential guitarist. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to Nail Lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.